Welcome, dear listeners, to Broadcasts from Elsewhere. We talk about media that you may not hear about elsewhere. I'm Enigma, and I'm your host. This is the last episode of November. That will be posted in November at least. We do have 2 bonus episodes coming out for you very soon. They'll be posted in December. This will be the last one for November. And then soon after we get those bonus episodes, we're going to move on to some Christmas specials and movies for you guys, and hopefully you will enjoy those. We will be taking off Christmas in December, meaning there will be no episode on the 25th, despite the fact of it being a Monday. There will be no episode. But you will still get plenty of content, do not worry. It will just be 1 episode, I promise. Today, we're talking about Ed and His Dead Mother from 1993. It actually has pretty surprising, recognizable casts in some manner. There's a few people you're not going to recognize, obviously, but to me, the thing that stood out the most was that we got Steve Buscemi as the lead role as Ed himself, and then playing his mother is, I'm not butcher her name, but it's Mary Margolyes. You might know her best as Professor Sprout from the Harry Potter movies. So yeah, it's kind of crazy to see them both in something like this, you know? But, yeah, this movie is a lot of fun. I personally would say that if you can, watch it first and then listen, because this is, I will be spoiling this movie, of course, and I really think this movie is actually pretty good. I will say that it is pretty damn raunchy at times. There's a lot of innuendo or, suggestive speaking and whatnot, and there is some nudity that you will see. So fair warning on that stuff. And of course it's about, death, so of course be prepared for that kind of stuff, There is a beheading as well, so there's that, but that's all the real trigger warnings we need to worry about with this kind of movie. But it is such a fun movie in my opinion. It doesn't even deserve to be put into the category of bad, in my opinion. It's a pretty good movie. It's just so silly. And it's got really original concept, in my opinion. Basically the idea, if you want to hear a little quick synopsis before we get into the actual plot and spoil everything, a brief synopsis would be: a man is missing his mother so badly that a businessman offers to revive her for him. And unfortunately, things go sideways. That's about the best I can say without getting into spoilers, but we will be getting into spoilers soon here. But I did just want to give a brief, explanation and a chance if you do want to go see it. It is on Tubi. I do recommend it. It's a very good movie in my opinion. Let's get on to the plots and commentaries section of this. So, spoilers ahead, of course. You have been warned. So, we start in black and white. Don't worry, the rest of the movie's in color. Just these sections are in black and white. But we see Ed, he's talking to his lawyer. We see Ed is on trial currently for killing his mother, supposedly. They say that he decapitated his mother and committed matricide, basically. Matricide is the killing of one's motherly parent, by the way. So the lawyer asks him basically, what's your side of the story? Are you just a sick fuck, basically, and all that kind of stuff? And Ed admits that he did cut her head off, but that when he did cut her head off, she was already dead. It's funny because the lawyer's like, oh, so you did it after she's dead? Well, you're really a sick fuck then. He literally says something to that effect. It's funny. So we then flash forward a little bit, still in black and white, and it's to the trial. Ed's attorney is sitting there trying to do this whole spiel about, how innocent Ed is, and he's got some kind of letter he wants to present. Also, Ed's lawyer goes freaking wild during this little innocence speech, because he keeps bringing up different examples of how innocent he is. He's like, oh, he's as innocent as a calf suckling on its mother. And eventually it starts to get really graphic and sexual, and it's like, okay, someone needs to fucking calm down this attorney, because he starts going into as innocent as a young teen girl. And he starts going off about that, and the judge has to get his gavel out. It's like, okay, that's enough. Just please present your evidence. Anyways, Ed's just sitting there with his head in his hands, being like, how the fuck did I get myself into this mess, basically? And now we get our flashback, which will be most of the movie, by the way. The whole trial is basically just, what takes place after the events of the movie. But anyways, so now we're flashing back, and now we're in color. First thing we see is we meet Uncle Benny, which is Ed's uncle, and he is spying on the neighbor with the telescope, like watching her sunbathe in her bikini. He's a real perv, honestly, the whole movie. Yeah, he says this great quote when he's talking to Ed, because he's watching the girl and he's like telling Ed, hey, you need to get over your mother, you should go, because Ed's mother just died, but not very recently. It's been a whole year. Ed is still grieving. I get it. It can be tough to let go of a parent, especially. I haven't lost a parent yet, knock on wood, and I don't know how that will affect me when I do, but, I'm sure it is not an easy thing to go through. But, he tells him, basically, you need to focus on other things in life, like her, and he says this quote, because he's talking about, he has other life, and he says, sex is life, and if it were a pronoun, it would be her. That has got to be one of the craziest quotes I've heard in something like this. It was great. Anyways, we learned that Ed has inherited $60,000 from his mother's life insurance fund after she died. And like I said, it's been 1 full year since her death. Also, he somehow has not touched that $60,000 in the entire year, which either means he is better at saving money than I am, or he just really does not want to spend that money. Because I would have blown through that by now, probably. Or at least a good chunk of it, I imagine. Because, I probably would have used it to get some stuff I need, like a fucking, new appliances, or a new place to live, or a new car, or something. But no, he just kept it for some reason. But it's good, because he needs it for this movie, for sure. He spends quite a bit throughout this movie. So, he dismisses his uncle's stuff about, you need to get over here and stuff, and he just starts heading to work. See, Ed also inherited the hardware shop that his mother owned when she died, so now he owns the Chilton hardware store. His name is Ed Chilton, by the way, I guess I should mention that. Obviously his name is Ed, but last name. So he owns the Chilton hardware store. So here we also meet, he goes to the store, and we meet another semi-major character. He goes by the name Big Lair. His name's Larry. They just call him Big Lair for short. Anyway, we get to meet him. He doesn't really do anything super important right now, but there is a great scene. We get this kind of running gag about the priest, or the reverend rather, who wants to kill his wife, because apparently his wife has been cheating on him, and we talk more about this later. So the reverend calls in at one point while Big Lair's talking to Ed a bit. And he just has this most nonchalant chat with him about, different, bladed tools. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm sure you could slice your cheating whore wife into her dead. Or you could use a chainsaw as well. And it's like, bro, you can't be talking about this kind of shit. This makes you, complicit for murder, my man. But it's kind of a running gag in this movie about the Reverend trying to find different ways to kill his wife. It's pretty fucked, I'll admit, but it's dark humor. So, anyways, we see a businessman come into the store now, and of course he's looking for Mr. Chilton, Ed. So he goes to Ed. He asks him if they have some private they can speak. So Ed takes him to his back office. It's here where the businessman gives his pitch. His name is AJ Paddle, and he works for something called the Happy People Corporation. And he explains to Ed that his whole deal is that they sell life, and that it only costs $1,000. So basically, his pitch is that he will bring back Ed's mother from the dead for $1,000. And he even tells him, guarantee, don't have to pay me until you see her in the flesh, alive again. And Ed, not seeing what he has to lose, because he thinks this is ridiculous, but he's like, well, if I don't have to pay you until you, prove it, then sure. He even admits that that a lot of people are doing it. Especially, he mentions that the people in Washington, like higher ups, like senators, I'm guessing, are doing it. And honestly, I can believe that. I mean, just look at how old some of the senators are and other political figures. It would not surprise me if they were just, revived corpses or something. They freaking look like it sometimes, some of them. Anyways, so the next morning, AJ comes over to visit Ed at his house, but he has a bit of bad news. You see, AJ wants to go get Ed's mother's body, but it turns out that she donated some of her parts to science. So she's all chopped up. She's missing a few organs. Some of her body is just chopped up as well. So he tells him, this was unprecedented, and we're going to need extra money because we got to replace parts and whatnot. And he tells him that we could still do this, but it would have to be raised from $1,000 to $3,500. And being a haggler man, counters that with $2,500, and AJ is able to accept that, but he tells him you have to give me $1,000 up front. So he goes ahead and pays him $1,000, and they get on with their business, right? So later that night, we get to see Ed. He's making his home ready for his mother's arrival. Benny thinks that he's getting the stuff ready for a date or a girl that he's bringing over or something. And Ed just kind of lets him believe that because, how are you going to explain to your uncle that his sister's going to be coming back to life? Right? So, as Ed's getting stuff ready, he hears a knock on the door, but it turns out to be not his mother, but the neighbor girl that his uncle was spying on earlier. Her name is Storm, by the way, which is a pretty badass name, not gonna lie. Every time I hear that, all I can think of is the X-Men character, because I don't think I've ever met a person with the name Storm, but I'm sure they exist. Anyways, she comes in and she starts to kind of basically seduce Ed. She seems to think that he's the one spying on her rather than the uncle. But the thing is, apparently she enjoys being spied on, so I guess she's into voyeurism, which we don't kink shame here, so good on her. She knows what she likes. Things are going to start getting steamy between them. They start making out on the couch and stuff, and they're pretty sure they were thinking about, going all the way with this kind of stuff. But right as things are getting like that, Ed hears a car screech to a halt outside. It's AJ's car. So Ed rushes her out the back door. He rushes Storm out the back door, that is. And he goes to answer the door. And now his mother is here, in the flesh, alive. And AJ's there as well, of course. And we never really learn her first name to my memory. So I just call her Mother throughout this, because that just makes the most sense to me. Because Ed never calls her by her first name or anything, and Benny just usually calls her, your mother, or something like that, so I just call her Mother. Anyways, she stood straight away to straightening up the place a bit, and Ed goes ahead and gives the rest of the money to AJ. So the next morning, Benny's in the kitchen, and he's kind of distraught looking, you can tell. He's just eating his cereal, kind of dumbfounded look on his face. Ed walks in, and the first thing Benny says, he doesn't even flinch much, he's just stares off in his face and goes Ed, your mother's in the fridge. It's the best fucking line to me. It's so fucking great. But yeah, so Ed opens the fridge, and yes, sure enough, there's his mother just kind of crouched up and folded up in the fridge, just sitting there, kind of just waiting. She's like, oh hi, good morning, Ed, here's your juice, and just hands him a glass from the, while she's in the fridge. It's so weird. And he doesn't even he's oh, thanks, and closes the door, just what the fuck? But for the best guess I can think is that maybe it's helps preserve her, but she did that of her own volition. She didn't, no one else put her in there, she just climbed into the fridge and sat in there. So Benny and Ed have a little talk, and of course Benny knows that, that you must have done some kind of crazy shit to bring her back, because, people don't just come back from the dead, So of course he's this isn't right, you shouldn't have done this, But Ed doesn't want to listen to him, so he goes ahead, he goes off to work, and he's on his way out, he runs into Storm again, and Storm asks about the dinner, basically. And of course he accepts. Well, he says he can't do tonight, but he'd to another nightmare, basically. Anywho, we see his mother watching from the window also. Like, she's got like a big scowl on her face, and this is also like a common theme throughout the movies, that she's always like watching anytime he's with her, more or less. She's usually like somewhere judging, not all the time, but a few times, at least 3 or 4 times throughout this movie she's watching. So she does not like this girl, basically. Then we watch his mother heads back downstairs, and she catches Benny in the act while he's trying to get the telescope out. You see, she had hid it away earlier when she first got home, while she was doing all her tidying up. So he finds it in the closet and is trying to like sneak it out, but she catches him, and she takes it away from him, but as soon as she gets it in her hands, she collapses and falls over on her back. This is a funny little scene. It kind of goes on for a little bit, but Benny like watches her fall, and he just like kind of like kicks her a few times, like not like hard, but just like kind of softly like kicks her to see if like she'll move or twitch or anything. And after seeing that she doesn't move, he just like slowly gets the telescope out of her hands and just goes back to his business. Doesn't even give a shit that she's just fucking collapsed over here. And we get to see Ed at his store, and another new character here stops by. He's also rather important. His name is Rob. Rob used to work for the Chiltons at the hardware store, but he kept stealing from them, so Ed's mother got him fired. And he basically was supposed to be in jail, but he supposedly got out on good behavior. It's never really said for sure, but I think he just escaped jail, honestly. Anywho, he tries to threaten Ed and tell him, like, or ask where his mother is and stuff, because he doesn't know that his mother is dead. Or was dead, rather. But he's basically, like, oh, that was a mistake, she shouldn't have put me behind bars and all this kind of stuff, and he tries to threaten Ed with his giant knife. But luckily Big Lear comes by, like, pretty much right at time, and he doesn't even, like do anything, really. He just kind of comes up, and I guess for some reason Rob is afraid of him, because he just starts to get, like, really nervous and, like, intimidated by Big Lear. Maybe it's just because he's larger than him, so maybe he's just like, oh, this guy could beat me up, But, he intimidates him and he scares him off. He runs out the building. So then we get to see Ed comes home and he sees Mother is still just splayed out on the floor while fucking Benny's over there, like, eating some ice cream or some shit. Like, he didn't even try to do anything. He's like, oh, we should probably just leave her there. She'll be fine. We'll just bury her again. Because he doesn't like, think she should be alive again, which, valid, in my opinion. But of course, Ed wants to take her to the hospital, so he runs out to his car real quick, I guess to get it ready or something. He doesn't take her with him. He runs out to his car, but who's out there waiting for him except for AJ? So AJ is there pretty much right on time, which is very suspicious. But he tells him, like, what she needs is more life. And he tells him, if you pay me $900, I'll go ahead and help her right now, and we can get her all better. So Ed, of course, agrees to the pricing, and AJ comes in, and he bends over, and we see him, like, messing with her mouth a bit, and then she springs back to life. So we don't actually get to see what he did, but one can guess once we get to this next part here. So he sells Ed a container that he says has life in it. He sells him, oh, yours for just $349.99. Sounds like a real infomercial sale, doesn't it? So Ed writes him a check, he takes the box from him, the container from him, he opens it up, and it's full of, like, these huge cockroaches. The really big ones. Gross, And he's like, what the fuck? These are just bugs. So AJ explains to him, like, well, in order for her to stay alive, she must consume living beings to absorb their life force. So, the bugs, you feed her 2 every night, no more, no less, at bedtime. And that'll keep her alive. So, he heads off after that instruction, and then Mother goes ahead and gets dinner ready, which she does really fucking fast, because, like, considering she got revived, and then immediately cooks the meal within the span of maybe 2 minutes. So, I guess coming back from the dead gives you superpowers. We see that a little bit later too, so. But it's funny, when she tells them that the supper's ready, they notice something's a little off, because she says, you poor fucks must be starved. And that's, like, really unusual language for her, because she doesn't usually curse or anything like that, at least when she was alive, originally. So, So it's, like, a little suspicious, like something might be wrong with Mother. So then we get to actually see AJ at his work in Happy People Corporation. It's just a big office building, honestly. But he goes in to see his boss in his boss's office. And he's not really happy with him because of how he's been doing sales. You see, he's been giving Ed, like, more or less the sales prices on a lot of things. He's like, listen, this man has $60,000 to burn through. I want you to get every cent out of him that you can. So he tells him, like, you have 2 days to get another $50,000 from Ed. Otherwise, you're off. Because he also explains to him, like, a lot of other countries are coming up with their own versions of the animation technology. So soon they may not be the only people in the business with it. Apparently the Dutch are working on some. He even says that the Japanese are working on, like, a homemade kit version for reanimation, which I have to wonder what that looks like. They also don't explain how reanimation works in this movie. They don't explain what the ritual is or anything like that. We do get to see a ritual for something else later, but we'll get to that when we get to that. The next morning, Ed heads downstairs, and he sees that Mother has been very busy. And he's in the kitchen, breakfast, of course, and Benny explains to him, like, she painted the walls, she organized the cupboards, polished the silverware, she started on a dress and baked some pies and stuff. And this is really funny. Ed turns around, and there's just, like, fucking, like, 5 dozen pies or some shit just everywhere throughout the kitchen. And they're all, like, those, like, apple pies with, like, the lattice on it. It's so funny. Just pies piled on top of each other. There's a few that are still in the oven. Like they're already baked and everything, but they're just sitting in the oven because there was nowhere else to put them. And he goes to the dishes and he sees that the container full of bugs is empty. So she ate everything in the container. So basically she's all supercharged and, like, hyped up on life, so to speak. Anywho, they hear a barking noise outside, and they look outside to see his mother chasing a freaking dog with a fork and knife, like, the most cartoonish shit you could imagine, honestly. And we don't really know if that dog died, by the way. We cut away from that scene before she can catch the dog, so I hope that she did not catch it. That is my hope, that she did not actually catch and eat the dog, because that's not something I want to think about. So later that day, we cut to Benny and Ed on the porch. Benny's still very much against this idea, rightfully so after that scene with the dog and everything. He tells him, listen, you need to get a refund, and you need to put her back in the ground where she belongs, because this is not right. Like, you need to let her rest. She's dead, she should be resting in peace, not, this. So, Ed, of course, still doesn't really, more or less, is still, like, against that, or on the fence about it, at least. So Benny leaves, though, but Storm comes by and sits with Eddie on the porch for a bit, and they talk for a little bit, and then they just end up making out, like, really heavily. And they agree to meet up tomorrow for dinner and whatnot. But, again, there is a brief thing where Ed goes back upstairs after his little makeout session, and his mother is dancing, I think it's like the salsa, because it sounds like the music that they're playing, and she's got, like, kind of like that style of dress that she's wearing, and she's dancing like that on her bed, and she's just, like, dancing, and she casually talks to him, like, hey, you should stay away from that Storm girl, while she's just, like, dancing and going crazy. It's so stupid, so fucking funny, so stupid at the same time. Next we go to the hardware store again, and Ed's already at work, and we get another thing with that Reverend running gag, where now he's trying to buy bear traps, because apparently he had ordered some at the store, so he wants to use the bear traps on her and his wife. And he now explains that she cheated on him with the entire church council, including the women, apparently, so, we stand by Queen, But also don't cheat on your partners. Not cool. But anywho, so he's basically saying, like, after she did all that to me, she cheated on all those people. That's when he even says, like, if it had just been 1 or 2 people, or even 5 people, he wouldn't have worried. I don't know how many people are on our church council, but I'd imagine probably at least a dozen. So, yeah, I guess it's funny that he was okay with a few people, with her cheating on him with a few people, but not with an entire council. So basically his whole thing is like wanting to be, show that he's a man kind of thing. Anywho, he doesn't get his bear traps in the scene, but he does get them at some point apparently. I guess off camera, but we'll get to that later. But Ed gets a call from Benny and he has to head home, and he arrives to see that his aunt and uncle from his father's side have come to visit out of nowhere, basically. So, since they were under the impression that she's dead as well, they had to come up with a different story. So, Benny, thankfully, came up with the explanation that this mother is actually Aunt May, who is Mother's identical twin sister, and that's why they look alike. And of course they buy this. So Mother is making sandwiches for everyone. She brings them out, and she leaves and says she needs to get drinks. Now the aunt has a dog with her little, small, I don't know what breed it is, but it's a very small, toy poodle type thing. Anyways, we already know how she feels about dogs, so of course, we're already on edge with that, right? So that dog follows her into the kitchen when she goes to get the drinks, and not long after we hear some mechanical, like a blender kind of sound, right? And of course, so Ed runs into the kitchen to see what's wrong, to see if the dog's in the blender, basically. But thankfully the dog is safe, and it's just her making tomato paste for the sandwiches, apparently. But the dog is safe, so they return him to the aunt and uncle, and Ed's like, okay, you gotta get them out of here, this is not safe right now for them, they should not be here. And I think so, you'd think he would just tell him, oh, sorry, something's coming up, you guys gotta leave. No, Uncle Benny goes up to them and just screams, get the fuck out of my house, basically. And so they just pack up and just speed off in their car. I thought he would at least handle it calmly. No, he just runs over to them and just tells them, get the fuck out of my house, basically. And they just run, he literally curses at them. I don't know what exactly he says, but he curses at them and get the fuck out of my house. And they leave. So great. But later that night, Ed is going over to Storm's place, but when he's on her porch after he knocks on her door, and everything, and he turns around and he sees that she's coming out of his home. She comes out of his front door. And of course he's like, what the hell are you doing in my house, She's like, oh, well, I was just looking for you. I had to see you again, and all that kind of stuff. But we do get a shot of her from behind, and we can see a roach crawling on her. So keep that in mind, that is important. But she invites him inside, and meanwhile, Benny is trying to feed Mother her nightly dosage, the bugs. When he goes into the room, she's missing. But while that's happening, Storm and Eddie are once again at it, trying to get down to business, They try to do things upstairs, but the doorbell rings, and of course it's Benny at the door, and he tells Ed that, Mother's went missing, and he thinks that maybe she went to the lake or something, because apparently she's been by there before. They think that maybe she went there to go search for food or life, basically. So they go off to search, but meanwhile we get to see Mother coming home as Rob comes by and breaks in to the house. And he kind of roughs up the place a little bit. He basically just takes picture frames and breaks them, and then he for some reason starts playing her piano that she has for some reason. And as he's playing the piano, she walks in, returning home basically. And he of course was told that she was dead by everyone in the town, so he's like, well, what are you doing here? What the hell? And he tells her well, I'm here for revenge and all this stuff, and she just takes this very calm. She's like, oh, hi Rob, how you doing? You want some tea? And he takes her up on the tea and whatnot, so he clearly doesn't give too many shits about the idea of her being dead, I guess. So she brings over the tea and finger sandwiches and stuff for him and stuff, but he takes his tea, it's actually coffee, so he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You told me it was his tea. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll go get you some tea instead. And this was one of the funniest fucking moments to me. So she runs to the kitchen, she goes to the kitchen with the cup, right? And she comes back out, and she's like, oh, this is embarrassing. I'm all out of tea. You'll just have to settle for this. She brings out a freaking chainsaw and runs at him with the chainsaw. So they cut away from that because they don't show us the actual kill scene. But we get to see later that day, Benny and Ed, or Ed comes back, because Benny returns home because they see that there's nothing at the lake that they went to. So he tells Ed, go ahead and go home, and we'll you wait there in case she comes home, and I'll go search some other places. He tells I can go to the animal shelter, the zoo, or all these other places to make sure she's not there. So I figure she's trying to feed, right? So Benny comes home later on that night, and he finds the place in shambles. There's just furniture toppled over, there's blood all over the couch where Rob was, and Ed is just sitting there like in a catatonic state, just on the rocking chair, just like walking back and forth, like in a state of shock. And Benny finally putting his foot down. He's like, you have to kill her. You have to put her back in that grave. There's no way we can do this anymore. But Ed's still in denial. Decides instead he's going to just make some new locks. So he installs new locks on every door, and he gives the keys to Benny. Tells him, guard these with your life, more or less. But Benny is still telling him, you have to do this, and if you're not going to do it, I will. And he gets a pistol out that he had hidden in a shoebox, right? And he goes out and he runs upstairs. Ed doesn't even stop him because he's like, I guess he just knows he can't stop him. But so he goes upstairs with the gun, right? And we hear a few gunshots go off, and then Benny yells down to Ed, and he says, Ed, you might want to come up here and see this. So Ed does. He goes ahead and goes upstairs to see what's going on, and we see that Mother is standing there just brushing her hair like nothing happened. She's got 5 bullet holes in her back. She's just sitting there chilling, just brushing her hair, nonchalant, unbemused at all. And she's like, you smell some smoking. Somebody smoking? So they realize that they've got some bigger problem on their hands. So Ed goes outside now, and he sees Storm. She's loading her car to move away. See, it turns out that Storm is working with AJ in some way. It is said exactly what she was doing later, but it's kind of not explaining as to why. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But she's trying to move away, and she's really cold with Ed, even though Ed's trying to get her, why are you, wanting to move away? And once again, we see Mother watching their conversation from the window again, being a fucking creep as usual. But Ed goes off and he finds AJ at a bar, and they discuss the matter of killing Mother. And AJ tells him, I can help you, but it's going to cost you $50,000. Because he's got to get that check, from them. So I assume maybe that's what they were working on, but it seems like they were working together, him and Storm were working together even before there was the $50,000 problem, so I don't know. But we'll get to that in a second. Back at Ed's home, Mother knocks out Benny and steals the keys from her so she can escape. And the first place she goes is to her hardware store. And Big Larry sees her there, and he doesn't seem too shocked. He's a little shocked, but he doesn't he takes it alright, considering, So she goes back to the store and starts looking at lawnmowers, and she says she wants one that could cut up a dog, is what she tells him. And he, once again, is not fazed by this, because this man will give you killing advice for some reason, and he shouldn't be doing that, because he is a fucking hardware store clerk. But this man one day is going to end up arrested, I swear. But anywho, he tells her, well, you need a riding lawnmower for that. So she agrees. So she's like, riding lawnmower it is then. So she gets that from him. And then back at the bar, AJ is explaining to Ed how he will, kill his mother. He basically tells him he must, sever her head and bury it in the northeast corner of the grave between the 1st and 12th stroke of midnight in order for her to stay dead. And if he fails, she will kill anybody that she comes in contact with, starting with the person who buried her. He also says, after you bury her head, you must then bury her body in the southwest corner of the grave, with the neck facing towards the head. He also tells him, since this is your contract and you want her back to life, you have to do it yourself. It's basically Pet Sematary rules, if you don't know Pet Sematary. Because Pet Sematary's whole thing is you bury your own, so if you want to bring somebody back to life, you have to bury them in the cemetery yourself, otherwise it doesn't count. This is like the reverse of that, I guess, because it's like you gotta bury your own, but this time they stay dead, rather. So then we cut to Storm's place as she's still trying to pack up a bit, and Mother just breaks down the wall. She just busts the wall on her new riding mower, that is, and tries to run over Storm. She's able to hide under the couch, more or less, or under some cushions, so that the riding mower doesn't get her. But while she's trying to shred through the cushions to get to Storm, we see a chainsaw cut through part of Storm's door, and then after he cuts a hole, he reaches in and opens the door, and it's Ed. He's got this fucking wacky-ass look on his face. And so Mother tries to kind of like beg and plead with them, like, no, don't do this to me, you know. And she tells him it's all her fault. She got me addicted to life, so apparently she said she gave me the overdose. So apparently Storm's whole thing was to overdose the mother and get her addicted. But what is the purpose of that is my question. Because, yes, I know AJ needs his money, but they explained earlier in the movie when they're talking that they gave her that place to live. So that means that they must have been planning this for a while, because she's already their neighbor, and she might be like a slightly newer neighbor, but she's still their neighbor already when the movie starts. So it's not like they just hired her after they found out, like, oh, well, after he found out I need $52,000 from this man. So it was already basically a sting operation from the beginning. I just don't understand what the purpose is of, you know, like, overdosing and all that kind of stuff, unless they were, like, always after his money to get all the $50,000, $60,000, just everything he has. And granted, the boss does want that, but did AJ always want that is the question, I guess, really, you know what I mean? Either way, so after she tries to plead, she's unsuccessful, and Ed goes ahead and saws her head off. We don't see this because it was kind of cut away, and we hear the from the chainsaw. So he beheads her, and then we get to see later that night as he goes to the graveyard with her head and body. And what's funny, he has her head in a burlap sack, but even if the head is disconnected, it's still alive, so it's still talking to him while he's trying to, like, bury her. And they have a brief, like, heart-to-heart and stuff. And it tells you, like, you know, because there's this whole thing where he promised her that he was never going to say goodbye before she died the first time, you know, the original time. And he explains to her, like, well, I'm not saying goodbye, I'm just, you know, I'll always have you in my heart, but that doesn't mean I have to have you, you know, in person, in the flesh all the time, because I can always remember you as you were. And she asked him for, like, one final, like, kiss, you know, kind of like, because, you know, how mothers, you know, usually kiss your mother on the cheek or something like that sometimes. Not everyone does it, I don't do it, but, you know, some people do. Anyway, she asks him not to do that, and she starts to bite his lip, and while this is happening, the bell has already started tolling, so he's already running out of time, because he has to do it before the 12th stroke of midnight. And, so, he's finally able to wrestle her off, though, and he buries her in the dirt with his hands, with his bare hands. And all seems well because she stops moving, she stops talking. So you may be wondering, though, what about the body? Don't worry, almost there. So he gets back to his car, and we see some officers pull up. And at first you think, oh, they're here for him, right? But no. See, the graveyard where his mother was buried at was right next to the church. It's in the church's yard, basically, you know, which I've seen before. I used to do that a lot in, like, the olden days. But, so what they're actually there for is that the Reverend actually went ahead with his plan and tried to kill his wife with the bear traps. Thankfully, he was unsuccessful somehow or another, and his wife is still alive. But they come there to arrest him, and of course they're like, well, what the hell were you doing here, Ted? Because it's the middle of the night and stuff. He's like, oh, I was praying for my mother at her grave. And, like, at the middle of the night, he's like, well, you know, they don't really say anything else about it, but they don't worry about it too much. And they tell me, oh, okay, you can go, you're free to go, it's fine. We're just here for the Reverend. And he opens his door, and out pops the rest of his mother, the corpse, without, like, the headless corpse just pops out of the fucking car door. And they're like, oh, you sick fuck. And that's when we finally go back to the trial setting once again. And we're back in black and white once again. But thankfully for Ed, he's found to be not guilty. And much to the audience's dismay, apparently, because, like, you know, there's always the audiences that watch the trials every now and again. And they're all like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? What do you mean he's not guilty, basically? And so after he's walking off from Victor, he sees Storm in the courtroom right before he exits the courtroom. She approaches him, she's like, listen, I know it was a job and everything, but in all honesty, I actually did fall for you. So they start to make out, and as they make out, the color comes back. So we have our final scene here. Everyone's back at the hardware store. They're kind of like, what do you call it, renovating it a bit. It seems like they're doing a new coat of paint and reorganizing some areas and whatnot. And while they're at the store, AJ comes by for a visit and tells him, oh, I felt real bad about everything that happened with your mother, so I decided to make it up for you. I have a surprise for you. He goes up to the door and lets in a man. Guess what? It's Ed's father. The makeup for the whole botched mother revival, AJ has now brought back Ed's father. And he's like, imagine like tries to disbelief and whatnot, and then the end. Honestly, I think that's a great ending for this kind of movie. This one was a lot of fun, honestly. Like I said, I've seen this before, so this is not my first time watching it, but it was so great. It's only my second time watching it, in fact. But I really like the concept of it. You know, a company that offers people animation and at a cheap price, I would say, because $1,000 brings me back from the dead is pretty cheap, all things considered. Considering, like, you know, how much it would cost to bury a person. If you could just pay $1,000 and not have to bury them and just bring them back to life, that'd be pretty badass. Just keep the roaches away from them, and the dogs too, apparently. Well, give them the roaches, but don't give them too many, basically. But anyways, I think that's a pretty unique concept. But I mean, it could be. It's probably not super unique, but it is interesting, if nothing else. Not much we can say for sure. But I really like this movie. I think if you're into, like, you know, these kind of things, you'll probably like it too. Like I said, it's more on the good scale than on the bad scale, but it's really great. And the movie performance is all out and everything too. The only thing I said is it is pretty raunchy, and of course there's some, you know, kind of dark humor with the whole priest trying to kill his wife thing, but you know, if you look past some innuendo and some raunchiness and dark humor and nudity, then it'll be fun. This is a good movie in my opinion. I really liked it. And not, hey, you just heard how it ended, and you heard everything about it, so either way, you're golden, just in case you didn't actually want to watch it. But once again, it's Ed and His Dead Mother on Tubi from 1993. Recommended, for sure. Which is funny, because it only got like a 5 out of 10 on IMDb, which is criminal to me, honestly. But that wraps it up for this episode here. Now, next time, we're going to be looking at a movie I've been kind of waiting to cover, honestly, because as soon as I heard about it from my friend DL, I was already like, well, something must be amazing about this, because clearly you're obsessed with it. So I went ahead and chose it as one of my bonus episodes because I knew I had to see what it was about. And since I've already actually seen it, but I'm going to watch it again to take notes and, you know, do a deeper dive on it and whatnot. And it is a doozy. So next time is The Heavenly Kid, and I'm going to have one extra episode again the next week, and then we're going to get into Christmas stuff. But thank you guys so much for listening. It means a lot if you spent your whole time, if you watched this whole episode, it really means a lot to me. Be sure to follow me here on Spotify for more episodes, and be sure to share this with a friend as well. Tell me if you know somebody else who likes bad or obscure or underrated movies, bring them over. I'd love to have them on an audience. Be sure to follow me on Twitter as well at BFE Podcasts. I'll be updating on there if ever I need to about scheduling, and if there's any issues with scheduling, if I need to delay an episode or something like that, if there's editing problems or other technical difficulties or anything like that, we'll be on that profile. But until next time, my name is signing off. Y'all have a great night.